afternoon. My name is Sharon Carver. I'm a developmental psychology faculty member here at Carnegie Mellon, and probably most relevant at this moment and for today is that this is my 24th year as the director of Carnegie Mellon's Early Childhood Laboratory School, the Children's School, where we live this brain development in early education and work with families and educators all the time. So it's my privilege today to introduce Ellen Galinsky. I think everything that we've done today has set us up to hear what she has to say, because we've been calling for work translating the science for educators, for parents, for the media. And Ellen has dedicated her career to that. She's a developmental psychologist and has done some of her own research on families and what children think about family life. That's her book, Ask the Children. She has spent a lot of time working on how to connect the research to early childhood educators, and in fact became the president of the National Association for the Education of Young Children. So she actually went out there and did it. And that's what's really important about her work. Most recently, she's been working on a project called Mind in the Making, where she has taken the research of people who are doing exactly what you all are doing and bringing it to educators and to families. I personally use her Mind in the Making book with the parents at the children's school, and for the last 2 years I've transformed my child development class into a class that is focusing on mind in the making. I use a great developmental textbook by Bob Sigler, who's right here, but to supplement that, I actually buy Ellen's book for every undergraduate I teach, so that they understand the importance of early brain development and the trajectory of all these essential life skills that we're talking about, these executive functions. So I'm thrilled that you're going to get to hear Ellen Galinsky.
Thank you. In many ways, for me, this is coming home. Not only was I born in Pittsburgh, but I also think of Pittsburgh or the Heinz Endowment and Marge Petruska as the home for Mind in the Making. She saw its potential when it was simply a gleam in our eye, and was the early funder who enabled us to do what we've done. We've been asking the question for now 17 years, what can we do to help children thrive? So we've looked at a lot of research now on adversity. What we're going to do is flip it and look at what are the opportunities that we have to help children thrive. And I have filmed and interviewed, not personally filmed, but with a film crew, and interviewed now more than 100 scientists. We are researchers, like you've heard here, including Nathan Fox and Chuck Nelson and Bob Sigler and so many others. And I'll bring them to you on video. Sorry that the lights preclude your seeing them in all their vivid, beautiful color. So what did we learn from the science? And here I'm going to be very similar to what you heard both Chuck and Nathan say. The early years are the foundation of the development of the brain. So let me take you to Sam Wang to talk about these early years. You've heard it before, but I'm going to share a short video.
Babies give us the impression of not knowing very much because they can't talk. And so they don't have the tools to communicate with us. But that doesn't change the fact that they are constantly learning. We are big brain animals, and we get to be pretty smart. But babies are born with the following challenges. Nearly all of their neurons are born, so they have those. But they don't have the connections yet. So their connections between neurons, those are called synapses, are forming. But the big challenge is that they don't know what kind of world they're coming into. We're able to live on every continent. We're able to live in hot weather, cold weather, all kinds of conditions, urban, rural, whatever it might be. And these babies have to learn all those conditions. They have to learn languages, they have to learn social customs, and so on. And so they have to be able to adapt to a wide variety of circumstances. Most of those synapses are formed after birth because the baby's brain grows from 1 pound to full size. And so about 2/3 of those connections net get formed in 5 years. 5 years turns out to be about 160 million seconds. And so every second of that baby's life, it has to form some fraction of those 700 trillion connections. So there's this constant construction project where babies and small children are putting together the basic foundations for who they're going to become later. And to make an analogy, it's like constructing a house. And if you think about all the things that babies have happen to them, where we feed them, we love them, we talk to them, they have other experiences with other kids, whatever it is that they encounter, all of those are learning experiences. And so every interaction you have with a child, from infancy onward, is an experience that could potentially shape those tens of millions of connections per second that are being formed and unformed. And that house gets built.
So what I'm going to, the second principle that's so important is what we've been hearing all day. It's relationship stupid is the way you might think of it. It's really all about relationships, and the Harvard Center on the Developing Child says that there is no development without relationships. So we have to remember it's the people. Chuck also talked about this, the importance of, and Nathan, about the importance of serve and return, that it's that back and forth interaction where the adult responds to, builds on, and extends what the child is doing. Here's some new research from Pat Kuhl that shows how important that back and forth interaction is to the developing brain. This is an interesting study because Pat Kuhl has a Meg machine, which is an incredible machine. It looks like a hairdryer from Mars, but it actually can take a movie of the child's brain in action. So let's look at Pat, who studies the development of language, but let's look at what she finds in the Meg machine.
What we're trying to document is what's actually going on in the brain. In the experiments that we're doing now, it's in that period from 11 to 14 months. What we did was to bring the babies in. They wear a nylon cap with 4 pellets in it, and the 4 pellets allow us to track the baby's head while they're in the MEG machine. MEG is the most sophisticated brain technology for imaging that we have. It's completely safe and non-invasive. So we get a movie of the brain, of particular areas of the brain and how intense the activity is. The mom, Rachel, was playing with Elodie, her 11-monther, while Elodie was in the MEG machine. And you could see the delicate and sophisticated dance between the two of them. She would move her toys and talk, and she was asking Elodie, do you want this toy or that toy? Or do you want, shall we do this or shall we do that? She was playing with her and singing with her, and you could see Elodie react. She moved with her eyes, she moved to point, and she would produce a sound or a number of sounds. She would produce speech-like utterances to direct her mother's attention. We're simply recording what goes on in the brain during that kind of activity. So our hypothesis is when the baby's listening to speech, and particularly parentese, the exaggerated speech, that the auditory areas are of course lit up, but that these motor planning areas are simultaneously lit up and also active. We use motherese or parentese to infants all the way through their childhood, so from 0 to 5. Parentese, unlike the popular notion of what baby talk is a simplified, really grammatical language that's in the here and now. So instead of a kind of flat, monotone, the way we often talk to other adults, it's got this sing-song increase in pitch. It's hello, how are you? So it's accompanied by facial expressions that are very dynamic, very exaggerated. After a lot of analyses, because this takes physicists and engineers and biophysicists to analyze these data, we can demonstrate that our hypothesis is true. It is supported strongly. The study is telling us that well before babies can actually talk, I mean, all they can get out is their first attempts at words and ba, 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 ma, ma, ma. It's not only the auditory area that's lighting up. It's Broca's area in the brain, which is responsible for planning to talk. What babies appear to be doing in this extremely early period is visualizing the actions. Their brains are simulating the actions that they would have to do to produce the things they're hearing their mothers and fathers produce. We've told sports stars for a long, long time, they should visualize as they see someone do an action. You see someone jumping off a ski lift. You should envision yourself doing that, making the basket, coming down the hill, skiing the slope, and your visualization helps. The image of the baby as a sponge, this was a discovery in the 90s. Babies are processing everything they see, everything they hear, everything that they experience, and they're processing it in a sophisticated way, so we can now replace the sponge image with the sort of action brain, the brain that perceives in a sophisticated way, but the baby's brain is built for action.
And that's important. I mean, you'll see his picture in a moment, but I have a 3.5-year-old grandson, and when he was a baby, my daughter signed up for one of these texting services that said, do not under any circumstances do anything but talk in adult language to children, where it's that mimicking, that back and forth, that parentese that's so important. So we have to be very careful that we're translating the science accurately. The fourth major lesson from these 17 years in the research is the importance of executive functions. These are the skills that we use that help us regulate not only our emotions, but our behavior and our cognition to achieve goals. And I decided to show you, based on this morning and our talk about poverty, I decided to show you the research of Clancy Blair. Clancy is at NYU, and he's been following groups of families living in poverty for a long time, and he's looking at under what conditions do these children thrive. Again, our focus is on what we can do to make a difference. So let's take a look at Clancy. You'll be interested, the early childhood people in the room will be interested in the fact that Clancy Blair got his start in working with Craig Ramey. For those of you who know the Abecedarian Project, like the Perry Preschool Project or the Chicago Parent-Child Center Project, he started, and he began to wonder, why does this intervention with babies work? And ended up with, it wasn't just the content that was being taught, there were some skills that were being developed. So let's look at Clancy.
The research that we do involves children from now prenatally up through age 5, 6, or 7. It's a fascinating time in development. Understanding more about the process through which children come to regulate their attention and their emotion and their behavior will be able to help kids who have difficulty with that, to help parents and teachers. When I was a graduate student, I worked with a man named Craig Ramey, and Craig is responsible for the Abecedarian Project, which was one of the classic early intervention projects of the 1970s. The scientific question was, could high-quality early care and education really make a difference in the lives of children at highest risk in terms of poverty? Abecedarian demonstrated that provision of that high-quality early education and support could really make a difference for kids. And I thought, wow, if these programs are having this good long-term effect, they must be affecting some underlying process. What is that? That led us to ask a lot of questions about where executive functions come from, how they develop, what are the influences on them, and can we use them as a basis for early education? Executive function is somewhat of an umbrella term. It includes sort of specific cognitive processes, inhibitory control, working memory, and cognitive flexibility. But it's really the use of all three of those and the services of planning, problem solving, setting a goal, meeting a goal, that really characterizes executive function. We really need to lay out the situation and then ask kids to act on the information that we've provided. That's the way we assess their executive function skills. We might say the opportunity is there for the child to have the snack, so they need to wait, a minute and a half. And so we'll do a variety of trials like that in which it's more or less the type of delay of gratification situation that a child might encounter.
The instruction there is for the child to look at the boxes, put a sticker in each of the boxes, and then the experimenter rearranges the boxes. The child chooses a box and finds the sticker.
Good job. There it is.
We rearrange the boxes again, and the task for the child is to go to a box that he or she hasn't looked in before.
It's empty because you already chose that one.
But some children return to the same box over and over. And the idea is to remember or hold in mind the child had searched in that box again and inhibit an impulse to return to the same place.
Good job. You did it.
So we establish that the child's familiar with size,
Can you give me the big block?
and then to sort the small blocks into the small bucket and the big blocks into the big bucket, and then to shift and put the big blocks in the small bucket and the small blocks in the big bucket. So a very simple shifting task.
And we're also looking at the tendency of children to regulate physiologically, things like heart rate. We also collect saliva samples from children so that we can look at levels of stress hormones.
4.
We administer the mask task.
They don't even have to be scary masks. You know, they're just novel. We want to know how reactive the child is to stimulation and how good they are at calming themselves down following that. When we see high levels of reactivity and high levels of regulation, those kids are looking pretty good on their executive function later. We know that the early relationship with the caregiver, the attachment relationship, is very important for development.
Oh, his tail.
Kids who are in these sort of high-quality relationships with their caregivers more rapidly develop these self-regulation skills.
Top of this dinosaur.
Even in just a 10-minute interaction, provides really valuable information. That mother was very appropriately supporting her children's engagement in activities, celebrating it with her, engaging in what we would think of as manifesting multiple aspects of sensitivity, positive regard, animation, support for autonomy.
If parents are too laid back and too detached or too intrusive, it's not providing kids with the opportunity to do the sorts of things that they need to do. And the same is true really of teaching. When we talk about teachers or parents scaffolding children's behavior, it's sort of setting the ground or helping with those foundational skills so that kids can develop these higher skills and then taking the supports away. There seems to be, in particular, a disadvantage associated with poverty. Not only the absence of resources associated with affluence, but also with an overabundance of aspects of experience that are not good to have. Noise, stress, chaos. Those things together are working against the development of thoughtful, reflective self-regulation.
We do simple things at home, and they appreciate it. I feel like they appreciate it more because it's more one-on-one, and we're focusing on the little things, and they go out, and when they interact with others, I'm like, oh, okay, like they're okay. Like at times I do feel kind of bad because they don't have a lot of flashy toys, but I'm like, you know what? That's okay. I give them enough love. They're confident. They're secure. We're good.
I think we know how to teach numbers. We know how to teach letters. We are good at teaching kids math. We're good at teaching kids how to read. That part's been worked out. What we know less about is the science of early learning, how kids come to engage with what it is that we're teaching them. And once we get a handle on that, we'll go a long way down the road toward better education systems and higher quality schools for all children, but especially for children in poverty.
I would argue that we don't completely know how to teach math. Bob Ziegler's wonderful research shows that. But what Clancy is saying is that we need to pay attention to the whole child and not just teach content. We also need to teach these skills. So on the basis of about 10 years of looking at this research, now I'm into year 17, I saw the brain is a pattern-seeking device, and I saw patterns in the research that I was looking at across different disciplines, and postulated a group of 7 skills that are based on executive functions, those 3 characteristics that we talked about: working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility, and that also promote them. So focus and self-control. Obviously, we've talked about that and we know what that is. Perspective taking is not just feeling what other people feel, but understanding what other people think. Again, you'll hear a strong emphasis on me on not dividing social emotional from cognitive, which we do for historical reasons, but putting them back together into the whole child. Communicating is thinking about what it is you want to communicate, and then how it will be heard. So it involves focus and self-control of not just blurting out anything, but also understanding how what you want to say will be heard. Making connections is where I use Bob's video of how you help children make connections among things in math and science and literacy and so forth. Making unusual connections is the basis of creativity, and we have to include creativity. In a world where you can Google for information, we need people who can think outside of the box. Critical thinking in this election period. Every time I watch a debate, I say, why are we not teaching critical thinking? We've got to be teaching critical thinking, starting early. Taking on challenges is more than coping with adversity. It's trying that next hard thing. And then ultimately becoming a self-directed and engaged learner, which is what I know from business and all the work that I've done on the workforce workplaces that we need to do. So we haven't sat on a shelf with this research, we've taken it out. Those of you in Pennsylvania who have used our Mind in the Making modules for educators, we have a new version. This is for families and community leaders, and it focuses on the 7 skills that are so important. And by bringing people in a community together to learn these skills across academic silos, principals and Head Start teachers and people who do parent education and social work and across the various systems, we are creating, because people have this intense experience together, more of a better system. We're redefining parent engagement because we don't think that the adults should just, the experts should know it all and tell parents. We show those videos to families with teachers, and they talk about what are the implications. So it's a very experience-based, as you'll see, learning. We're now in 20 communities in 16 states, with 2 more states planned for the rest of this year. We've also worked, and we've recently joined with the Bezos Family Foundation. They were funding research and they wanted to know how they could bring it to action, and particularly in those 0 to 3 years where there's a lack of systems, what we did was to write more than 1,000 tips. All of those tips are based on the importance of relationships. All of them are fun. All of them take the everyday moments that you have with your kids. They don't ask you to spend more time. All of them promote back and forth or serve and return or the dance or whatever you want to call, serve and volley, Pat Cool calls it. All of them promote that, and they all promote early executive function skills. So our tips are different from other people's tips because they really are based on those principles. And you can download them on your phone or you can get them in paper form and so forth. And we have about 100,000 direct engagements with that. We also created Take-Home Friday tips. These are tips that teachers can put in kids' backpacks for the weekend of fun things to do together over the weekend. We've selected with First Book a library of almost 100 books, 89 books to be exact, and we've created tips on how to read those books to promote executive function-based skills. With no advertising, we've had 554,000 downloads of these. I can imagine what would happen if we actually advertised these. And First Book with our library has distributed, these are books that are available to programs that serve low-income families, like Reach Out and Read, like other programs. They've distributed more than 1 million books in our library, which I'm pretty proud of. We've also taken the most frequent questions that parents ask, like the screen time question that was just asked, and we have turned them into what we call prescriptions for learning. Rather than seeing these as behavior challenge, remember I told you that we're relentlessly positive, we look for the opportunities. We've written 98 tip sheets that share this research with implications from the research on what you can do, and these are available in Spanish and in English. We've done 98 of them. So what's our theory of change? We have an article forthcoming in Child Development where we elaborate our theory of change. And the first is that it's relationships. You can't have an intervention that isn't about relationships. The first one I want to talk about a lot, I actually want to go back to what the Reverend Brenda Gregg said. Shame on us if we don't take what we know and turn it into action. So we aren't a campaign. You all called for a campaign. We aren't a campaign because we don't have a beginning and an end. We're just going to keep doing it, and that was the joy for us of joining with the Bezos Family Foundation, where they will continue to support in response to what you all need, new products, new interventions, new whatever. You come and tell us. You'll be surprised. We will listen. We're not a bureaucracy yet. But very important to us is taking a two-generational approach, and Aaron Dalton talked about that. We don't believe that you can work with kids unless you work with adults first. So all of our modules, in both the teacher-educator version, as you know, and in the new 7 skills version, always start with what's this skill in me, why is it important in my life, how can I improve it, an emotional experience with why, understanding what your husband is thinking and feeling, or your boyfriend, or your wife, or whomever, your girlfriend, why is that important in a relationship? Then we get to kids, but we start with adults, and I think that's really critically important. We have 10 principles of facilitated learning. They're not the usual, like I'm doing right now, the sage on stage notion. It is very highly interactive, and we, for example, give people real life experience before we ever show them the research. I don't know, I'm going to show a couple more videos. Do I have time to show this one, Marge? Okay. This is the famous Edtronic still face experiment. You might have seen Barry Brazelton doing it too. But when we do this, we start with adults, and we have one adult, and we say, you're the listener, and we have another adult, and they get a card that they can't show the other person. We say, you're the speaker. And then we tell the speaker to tell something important that happened to him or her. And the listener is told to have a still face, a frozen face, not to react at all. Well, if you want to see a room go crazy, it takes about 60 seconds, and people go nuts because they're not used to having, in a world where people are not responding to them. If we want teachers to think about what their faces look like, or the parents to think about what their faces look like with kids, this does it in a way that words would never do it. So take a look at Ed's experiment. Oops.
Dr. Edward Tronick of the University of Massachusetts, Boston, has devised a way to show how important social connection is to babies and how much it affects them when a connection with a parent or caregiver is broken.
Ready? Let's sit up.
First, Dr. Tronick places 6-month-old Mackenzie and her mother face to face.
Can I touch her when I'm...
He asks Mom to talk and play with her daughter the way she normally does.
Hi, sweetheart.
Obviously, their connection is strong. The baby is engaged, responsive, clearly emotionally content. Then, Dr. Tronick instructs the mother to disengage by making a still face. She stays there, but doesn't respond to her baby. Mackenzie is confused at first. She's not used to Mom acting like this. Mom turns back, but keeps the still face. Mackenzie expects her to re-engage, but when she doesn't, look how the baby reacts. Even at this young age, she tries to entice Mom to interact with her. She reaches out. She smiles. She flails her hands. All strategies for getting Mom's attention. When that doesn't work, she becomes fussy, emotionally agitated. And finally, she just gives up.
The meaning of the event is this emotion that the infant has experienced in relationship to this breaking of the connection in relationship to the mother. And that's a fearful, frightening thing. And the infant will do a lot to try and overcome it. But when they fail with a sense of helplessness and a loss of control.
Dr. Tronick then asks Mom to re-engage. It takes a moment, but soon the world goes back to normal for Mackenzie.
So you can see how powerful that would be, not just showing the research, but having the adults go through the experience. So if we want to think about adults and the responsiveness of the adults, the warmth and responsiveness, this is a very powerful lever. Okay, here's the requisite picture of the adorable grandson and the adorable daughter, my daughter and my grandson. But one of our tenets is that we're not teachy-preachy. We inspire change. It's really important to us to be inspirational and to build on what people are already doing that's good. Most of the research shows that's really important. We reinforce adult learning by reframing the debates that people have heard. I'm going to actually show you one video here, which is Stephanie Carlson, and tell you about the other ones. Stephanie Carlson, we've debated forever about play and why play is important, and people think, it's not really learning. What Stephanie Carlson has done in her research is to show how children really can learn to tackle more difficult processes as a form of emotional regulation, in a sense, social distancing, but how they can learn to respond to it by pretending.
We suspect that it has something to do with psychological distancing. So the symbol or the pretense situation is something that puts some space, in some cases literally some distance, physical distance, between you and the problem at hand or the temptation that you're trying to resist. That space allows for one to get a broader perspective on the situation and realize that that you have a choice in how to respond. Versus tunnel vision, a knee-jerk reaction of just going for the first thing that comes to mind. We've tried this as a frustrating task. So where children are emotionally engaged.
I have two really awesome toys. I have a doll and a car. Which one do you want to play with today? The car. So we can't play with it right away, but we're going to play with it in a little bit. But I want to make sure that it stays safe, okay? So we're going to put it in this box so that you can play with it later, all right?
They really want it, but they have to use a set of keys in order to open this box to retrieve the toy. The trick is that none of the keys works on this large key ring. And we're looking to see how long children persist at trying to get inside the box, how many keys they try, how long they try with the keys. In this experimental context, we impose this instruction to think about yourself, either your own thoughts and feelings, think about yourself in the third person, or to think about yourself as being somebody who has good self-control, good emotional control.
Which one of these characters do you want to pretend to be while you're working on this? Batman? Okay. So to help you pretend, I have this cape here that you get to wear. And so when you get frustrated, I just want you to ask yourself, how is Batman feeling? Can you say that now? Can you say, how is Batman feeling?
How is Batman feeling?
Yeah, yeah. So while you're working on this, if you get frustrated, just ask yourself, how is Batman feeling?
Children who have the suggestion, this mindset to think about themselves from a more distant perspective, see the situation in a different light and are able to regulate their emotions in this very frustrating task and persist longer at the task. We see that when we have this simple suggestion to pretend to be Batman, for example, children of age 5 perform as if they are 6 years of age, whereas their counterparts who are not encouraged in the same way to think about themselves as a different person with good self-control, perform much like their other age peers. So it's really a 12-month advantage that we're seeing with this simple suggestion. By helping children achieve the psychological distance from the situation, from the problem that they need, it allows them to engage in that reflection. So the distance provides the window of opportunity for reflection to come in and take hold.
So pretending is much more than playing. It really helps children create a psychological distance and tackle problems that they might otherwise not be able to. I'm not going to show you, you've seen Clancy Blair, I'm not going to show you Phil Zalazzo's research, but this is really important. He's looked at how we learn from experience, and we don't learn in the way that we teach mostly, which is question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, unless there's time to step back and reflect on what it is, the mistake that you've made and why you've made it. And that actually changes the brain. So exercise, Mim talked about the importance of exercise in helping children regulate their emotions. Stephanie looks at pretending. Phil looks at the importance of giving children a chance to reflect on what it is that they're learning, and they have much deeper learning that way. Other examples of reframing the tasks are Larry Aber has looked at how you reduce aggression and conflict in school and low-income schools. He's done a lot of research, and he's found that when teachers are teaching literacy, but if they give children a chance to look at the characters as people, what was that character thinking? What was that character doing? What do you think the character is going to do next? In other words, teach perspective-taking skills. The children not only gain in literacy, but they improve in perspective-taking skills. The perspective-taking skills are an important way to reduce conflict. We talked this morning about the 30 million word gap, and is it just simply the number of words that children hear? And Kathy Hirsch-Pasek and Roberta Golenkoff and Lauren Adamson have taken on this question, looking at just a sample of low-income kids, and have found no, it's actually not just the number of words. It's the number of words coupled with the quality, and the quality is that back and forth. She calls it a conversational duets, that back and forth interaction. That the number of words that kids hear by itself only predicts 1% of the variation in low-income kids' scores from going to 2 to 3. But the number of words in combination with that back and forth interaction make a difference. So we're always taking the current debates and bringing research to bear. We include child interventions. We don't think that an adult intervention by itself will do it. So we've been working with Megan McClellan at Oregon State University. She teaches executive function skills at circle time. It's so simple. I mean, teachers have circle time. So what do you do during circle time? It's again like the kind of experiment that Bob did. So what do you do when you're teaching, when kids are playing games or when kids are having circle times? She teaches executive function skills. These skills can be taught and particularly valuable for kids who are at greater risk. English language learners, they may be from families in poverty, but it might be a red light, green light. So let's say you do yellow light, purple light. Yellow light means go, and purple light means stop. And then you switch it up. And purple light means go, and yellow means stop. Games like that are based on red light, green light, or Simon Says, or all kinds of games like that, increasing in complexity. She's now gone from 4 to 7, has found dramatic gains in that self-regulatory executive function skill. We will be working with Tools of the Mind, also an executive function curriculum in the future, to see whether adding the adult component to Tools of the Mind, which is already an evidence-based practice, will actually improve its impact. We have adults set goals for themselves and for kids, but again, we go to the science. This is the work of Gabrielle Oettingen, and she worked with us to use her research on how do you bring about change that lasts. You know, that New Year's resolution that we're going to exercise, we're not going to eat, all those resolutions that we never keep. She's found that positive thinking leads to worse results. We're all told to think positively. I love this research because it's so counterintuitive. What she's found is you do need to imagine the goal that you have and how it will make you feel. So thinking positively in the beginning, but then think about the obstacles that you're going to face. And this is the work of Peter Gollwitzer, think of if-then strategies to overcome those, how you're going to overcome those obstacles. So if I don't want to exercise, I will. If that happens, then I will. And we have teachers and parents go through this, and again, makes a big difference. We want to have multiple touch points during the day. We want this developmental knowledge to be in the water, in the air. We have room, we have the tips that we've done, and we work with various sectors. So we started working with schools. We found that bringing this information to principals and teachers in the schools, we worked with the Kellogg grant to community schools, made a huge difference. And I'm almost finished. You'll be glad to know I have only about 3 more slides. And that they really like bringing this knowledge, taking this knowledge and bringing it down into the early years. So if we tried to take an early childhood intervention and push it up the hill, it would have been like syphilis. It might not have worked. But taking an intervention, bringing it to the schools first has been very powerful. We're working with healthcare professionals. We talked about the importance of doctors. We're reinventing pediatric care in Mount Sinai. We plan to bring it to other parts of the country. We're teaching this research to residents. We're also teaching it to nurses and family life workers and everyone who deals with the families. We are going to have rooms rather than waiting rooms so that there are activities for families to do. Posters all over the place. Museums and libraries, we've developed, we've redone the 7 skills training for museums and libraries. We've trained people in 24 states. And in the Children's Museum at Denver, we've got room stickers all over the place that have, in the places that were unused, have like the stairs, have activities, like the mirrors in the bathroom. We're really excited about that. We're incorporating room and mind in the making into home visiting. We're working with Every Child Succeeds, and then we'll develop a manual about how to translate both the training and tips into home visiting, particularly focusing on the adults because they aren't paying much attention to the parent as a person, and we think this is going to be transformational. We work with brands. We've got tips on Johnson & Johnson, Univision, we are on television, Pampers tips, Goya has it on its packages, and we created there's a television series, Wish and Poof, done by the creator of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, who's done a series that promotes executive function skills. And finally, we evaluate what we do. We're research to action to research. And so we're doing an evaluation. We found that we can improve kids' executive function skills. There's a grant in Provincetown through an I3 grant where we're evaluating. So I'm going to close with this video. It's only 30 seconds, and we'll share our philosophy.
Hang up the jackets, okay? I'm really rushing all the time. I don't have enough time just to sit down with them.
Being a full-time mom and having a full-time job, it's not easy. I always worry, am I doing enough with my kids? Am I doing the important stuff that they need?
Can't imagine what is in here.
It feels really powerful.
You guys.
You already have all it takes.
Maybe I just didn't look at it that way because I always want better.
Do you put your feet in them?
No.
No? I know that I can do it.
Which one is rough?
This one.
It's amazing the little things that we do, we don't even realize we're teaching our kids.
You did it, Mom.
Yay, good job.
You don't really think of brain development at that young of an age, you know, when you're 3 months old.
Thank you very much.